formula for Dylan.
Yeah.
Oh no, he didn't like tables, charts,
Yeah,
right?
tables and charts.
So if I'm going to think about a specific bond and how much I'm going to make, this is going to go back and talk about the interest that I'm going to make. So if I'm going to talk about interest, what formula do you think we're going to use?
PRT.
Exactly right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so everybody remember what all that means?
Yes. Principal.
Interest equals
rate,
principal times
time.
rate times time.
Right, and time should be in what?
Years.
Months.
Years.
Years.
If they give it to you in months, then you
Yeah,
put it over
Period.
12.
Yes.
Okay, or do it periods. And then my rate should always be a what?
Percent.
A percent that they give me. So I take that percent and move my decimal 2 places to the left to do my calculation. What does PRT really mean? What do I do if I have PRT all together on the same side? I multiply them all together, right? If they have, or they give me the amount of interest and then one of these, then I'll have to eventually divide. Okay? But that's what we're going to kind of go through today. So we're going to talk about the income by figuring out these kind of things. But again, this would only be for one specific bond, so then you'd have to multiply it by however many you have. And usually when they do interest on bonds, it's semi-annually. What's that mean?
Twice a year.
Twice a year, right? So a lot of the times when you do T, you'll use 1/2, because you'll do it for the first part and then the second part of the year, meaning, okay? So basically, in most companies or whatever, beginning of the year, like we're in now, in the middle of January, January 1st would have been the beginning of the year, so we would have started that 6-month cycle. And you would have started accumulating interest, okay? When they talk about how to do this, again, my principle is going to be what we did, the last section that we did. Remember when we moved the decimal and then multiplied by 100? For those, or 1,000, if it was a $1,000 bond, you have to do that first to figure it out. So look on page 296, and we'll start with letter A. So it says, whatever the guy's name is, Olive, owns 10 1,009% bonds. What is his semi-annual interest on the bonds? So I'm going to go through the process of doing this, right? I'm going to punch that information in. So do we have everything? Yeah, my $1,000 is the principal. What's my rate? 0.09. And my time? 0.5, 1/2, whatever you're going to do. 6 out of 12. Okay, so I'm going to get this grand total, which would be what? 45. But then I have to make sure that I do what?
Multiply it.
I got to multiply by the number of bonds that I have, so I multiply by 10, and I get my grand total. Pretty simple, right? So that's the first part.
Did you just do multiply by 1 and then divide by half? Instead of doing half and half or 2, you just multiply by 1 and then divide it by 2? Or do you
Yes, you can do it that way. Yep.
Wait, how'd you get the 45?
I just punched this into my calculator.
Oh.
So 9,000 times a half, or sorry, no, move the decimal. Would have been 90 times a half, which is 45. And then there was 10 bonds that he owned of that. So every bond you made $45 on every
I
bond.
got it right, but it's 10 times 1,000 times 0.09 times 0.5.
Yeah,
That worked.
yep. So yeah, you just multiply the 10. So remember, when it's multiplication, it doesn't matter when I do it. So you can do it right at the beginning. And what Evan was saying was, he's just going to do this for a full year and then divide by 2. So he's going to calculate it for a full year and then, okay. So there's multiple ways of doing it. B looks pretty much exactly the same thing, all right? The next section then, or the next part of this is bond yields. So if you're talking about a yield, they're basically talking about a percentage. Anytime that you hear a yield, you're talking about a percentage. So it's basically saying they want you to figure out what percent you're going or you're accumulating interest at, essentially. Okay, so you're gonna find your annual income, which we just did. You're gonna find out how much you made, and then you're gonna divide it by the bond price. The bond price goes through that process that we worked on last section.
If it's like higher or lower.
Yep, so if it's under 100, you don't care if it's over or under this time. You just have to do that, moving the decimal down. And then you would take that amount and multiply it to your total. Does that make sense? And then you're going to divide your interest divided by your grand total. Okay, because again, you want it to be a decimal, and then you're going to take that decimal and turn it into a percent. All right, so move over to letter C. And it says the Crescent Company's 1,009% bonds are offered at 101.585, which is the current yield. Or what is the current yield to the nearest 10%? So again, basically I'm going to do the same thing. So we had $1,000 times 0.09, but again, they're asking for an annual yield, right? So in this case, this is where Evan's thought process comes in. Now I'm going to do it for a full year. So if I'm going to do it for a full year, this half turns into a 1, really, right? So I wouldn't do that, and so then we would have had $90 here, because we would have done I equals, again, $1,000 times 9%, but now we would have it times 1, okay? And then you got to go back and you got to do what we did last section with that par value. So they said 101.58, right? So essentially, I'm moving the decimal place, and then I'm going to take that, times the $1,000, all right? So if I do this, I'm going to take my 1.015, so I'm moving it 2 places to the left because I'm always basing everything off of that 100, right? So again, in this case, it was 101, but I'm basing off. So I'm going to move it 2 places to the left, which is 1.01585. And then I would take that times 1,000. So essentially, you're moving it to the left, and then you're moving it back to the right. So if you want to just kind of skip a step, you're basically just thinking, well, if I'm moving 2 to the left and 3 to the right, I'm essentially just moving the decimal 1 place to the right. Does that make sense? And so then our grand total would have been 1,000, what?
1,015.85
cents. And then we made $90 in 1 year, so I'm going to take that amount of interest and divide it by the grand total. And this should give me a decimal, which was what? 0.089. Okay?
That's rounded.
Okay, so then 1, 2, I'm going to turn it into, and you already rounded to 8.9?
Yeah.
And we already got an 8 point. So again, when it says 10%, that's just 1 decimal place, right? Tens, hundreds, thousands. Okay? Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
All right. So in D, the semi-annual interest on $1,000 Lancaster housing bonds is $47.50. If you buy the bonds at 94.598, what is the current yield? What's the thing you have to really take into account here? No, they already found the interest for you. The interest is $47.50. But remember, what did we say at the beginning? Well, yeah, I'm going to divide to do that process, but what was the beginning of the section? What kind of income were we talking about? We're talking about the interest income, but it's annual interest. So it's for the whole year. So if you read this one again, it says the semi-annual interest on 1,000 was $47.50. So the first thing I have to do is take that $47.50 and what? Multiply it by 2. Okay? So take $47.50 times 2 and you get what? 95. That's going to be my amount of interest. And now we do the same thing to that other number that they gave us, our par value. So we move it to the left and then move it back to the right. So we would have had 945, right? Everybody see where I'm at? What was the decimal? Sorry. Thank you. And when I put that into my calculator, I get my decimal.
So we have
0.1.
1.1004249.
0.10, say it again.
0.
Okay? And now if I move it 2 decimal places, what's my percentage? So I get 10.0% or just 10%. Okay, so that's making pretty decent money, right? Remember what we talked about with percentages the other day, right? Anything over, yeah, 2 is outstanding. Anything over 5, put all your money in there. If you're getting 10, you're making bank.
Take out a loan and put money in.
Exactly right. And essentially, you can pay off, right? Okay, so, okay with that? So again, make sure that it's annual interest rate. And if they give you the semi, you just have to double it, okay? The last thing that they talk about in this section is the total cost of bonds. What's that mean? That means you're taking everything into account. So what else could you have to take into account? Well, you're talking about the yields again. You're going to find the yields basically the same way. But now you're also talking about commission and all that stuff. So what was commission? You pay the person that's doing this for you, right? So just make sure you see if there's an amount. So that would be a cost to you. Okay, so when they say what did the whole thing cost, that's what they're assuming. All right. So in this one right here, the other thing that you got to think about is how or when you buy this particular bond. Okay, so if it's semi-annually, your first 6 months, January, February, March, April, May, and June, when you would accrue that first semi-annual or 1/2, right? Well, what happens though if Bunkers goes about and buys one from but it's in that time frame? You know what I'm saying? So she doesn't buy it right away in January because she didn't have the money. February, March goes by, and she finally buys it from on April 1st. So who gets the interest?
Yeah, you're still getting interest.
Okay, so you got to make sure that you understand who's getting the interest. So if she bought it midway through that time frame, which would have been 3 months, would still get the first 3 months of interest, and then Bunk would get the last 3 months of interest. Now I did it that way because it's really simple, because 3 and 3, but it could get a little bit more complicated. So you still might have to do the full year, and then you might have to think about taking it times 1/12 or 2/12. You see what I'm saying? So by the months that you actually had it. Or you have to determine who gets it for which months. That makes sense what I'm saying to everybody? Okay? So let's go down to E. Reba buys 10 1,000 9.7% bonds through a dealer at 97.272 plus accrued interest of $24.25 per bond. So basically what that is saying is she's buying into these and she's getting the 10 bonds, but basically she has to pay back $24.25 per bond to the original owner because she's buying it in the middle of that series of months. That makes sense?
So it really beats on here.
And then, yes, and the commission of $4 per bond. So essentially, it's going to cost her an extra $28.25 per bond. Exactly right. What is the total cost of bonds to Reba? So the first thing I'm going to do is what we just did in the last section. I'm going to move that decimal 2 places to the left and then back 3 places. Now again, everybody understand why we're doing that? 2 places to the left is because it's based off 100, but then we're 2 places back to the right because it's $1,000 bonds. So if it's not $1,000 bonds, then you'd have to move the decimal. You would just multiply by it. So if it was a 500. So we would have 972.72. Everybody see how I got that number? Times 10. So then basically we would have had $9,727.20. And then we have to do what?
1,000 times 9.7%.
I already did all that. After that, what do I have to do?
And per bond.
Okay, so I'm going to take then 24, 25 plus 4, like John said, which is 28, and I'm going to multiply that by 10 and add it to that 9,727. So what do we get?
$282.5 is the 24.
We used to do small
Ten
one.
thousand nine seventy.
Yes.
Absolutely.
What letter was this?
E.
E. Okay, so
1,003.22.
what was the par value?
Was
900 and something?
972.72.
Okay. So I'm moving 2 places this way, right, and then back 3. So this would have turned into $9,727.20. Everybody good with that? Okay? Because that's how much I had,
The
right?
decimal was after the 7.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. After the 7. So we move it 2 places this way and then 3 back, so we would have 972, right? And then taking this times, how many bonds did we buy? 10, which gets me to my 9,727. Okay? And then it was 24.25
Plus 4 per month.
plus 4 plus this if you really wanted to do it this way. So you could have done 972 plus, or yeah, 972 plus 24.25 plus 4. And then taking it all times 10, or you could do it this way. So I'm going to take this, and then take these 2 and multiply it by 10.
Wait, the 97.27?
No, this one. $972. If you want to do the grand total instead of doing it times 10, times 10, times 10, everybody had this number right here, right? And you understand where you got that? And then I'm going to add my 24.25 because that's my interest, and then I'm going to add my $4.
I was just confused because.
Okay, and then if I get that grand total, I get what, 798.
$1,000.90.
There you go. And then I'm going to take this times 10. Right? So essentially, this right over here, I'm kind of doing it individually. This right here, I'm doing it just in one lump sum. You can do it either way. Okay, whatever.
9.7.
Go ahead.
$10,000.
$10,009.70.
So we get 10,000.
9 at the end.
10,009.
10,009.70.
0.70, okay? So now, that's my what? That's my answer, right? What is the total cost? And then if they would have said, what's the yield? Now I'm gonna do what?
That.
Now, for the yield, I would have to go back and I would have to figure out what my interest was, but we don't really have to do that in this part. They don't ask for that. They just ask what the total was. So the total should have been your 10,009.
And then if we had to do yield, so that would be our annual income, then divided by the bond price. And that bond.
Then you would have to go back and you'd have to go back and figure out what your interest was.
9.7%.
Yep.
It tells you.
Yeah, that's what you're doing, that's what you bought it for. But your yield is probably gonna go down a little bit because you had to pay the accrued interest back and stuff. So you can't really say what your yield is in that particular case because you haven't really started making money off of it. You're paying that interest back to YA because you bought it. Okay? So let's try F again. Julio Pujols, all right, Pujols is a son, I guess, right? Buys 21,008% bonds on April 1st at 105.288 plus accrued interest from January 1st. Commission was not shown. Okay, so that's easy enough, right? What is Julio's total cost? So, here's the first thing. The first thing that I'm going to do in this right here is figure out how much interest I did. So I'm going to do my I equals PRT. It's $1,000. How much? 8%. And I'm going to do it for a year because I want to know the grand total, right? So this would have been what? 80. Now we have to go back and figure out how much interest we owe to the people that we bought it. So think about this now, okay? So it says plus accrued interest from January 1st, but when did we buy it? April 1st, right? So if we did January 1st to April 1st, how many months do we have? January, February, March. We should have to pay back 3 months,
Oh.
right?
Okay.
Okay, so how do we figure out? Are we gonna do 3 months or 4 months?
Well, you do 4 months divided by,
You just do 80 divided by 12. right?
Okay,
And then you get that number times 3.
80 divided by 12, why are you doing that?
Because 80 is the full year's interest, and then you get monthly, and then that is 6.66.
Ooh, that's a bad number.
Yeah,
Times,
3 for the
and what'd you get?
$19.98.
$19.
I got 20.
Well, it all depends. Dill probably rounded this number right here. I would, okay, so if you're gonna do it that way, don't round ever. Use all the decimals that they possibly give you in your calculator. And then multiply it by 3 so you get what? $20. So do you understand where that's coming from?
we didn't factor in the 20 bond.
We haven't got that part yet.
Oh,
We're just doing this part first because we needed to figure out how much interest it was.
oh.
Okay? So now we're gonna go back and do that part. You're exactly right. Okay, so, what was my par value?
105.288.
105.288. Okay? So again, I'm gonna move it 2 places to the left because it's based off 100, but then I'm gonna multiply by 1,000 because it's $1,000 bonds, right? So it would have been 1,052.88 times what? 20. And we get what?
21,057.6. 21057.6.
21,057.66.
Wait a second though, what does it say here?
Trying to-
For each bond. Okay, so this one's a little different. Read the problem. What is Julio's total cost for each bond? So do I have to do this multiply by 20 part?
No.
No, because it doesn't ask for the grand total, it just asks for one bond. So basically, instead of saying multiply by 20, I'm gonna do what? I'm gonna add $20. Exactly right. So I'm gonna add $20 to this. Everybody understand? This 20 right here comes from this. But I'm not gonna multiply it by 20 because it didn't say what's my grand total, it just says for one bond. For one bond, right? So then this would turn out to be $1,072.88 for one bond. And then if they ask you what your grand total was, then I would take that times 20. So again, the biggest thing in these, they're going to try to trick you, so make sure you read the question carefully to understand what it is.
Yes, sir.
Everybody good there? So there's kind of some technical things in those, but you just got to make sure that you read the question. All right. So I believe there's only one section after this, which obviously we'll get to tomorrow. And so that leaves us a quiz on Wednesday. And then we'll go through it.
that is true. When it's all fit theory, we get a full
Oh,
period.
yeah.
You're true on both of those things. So there will be a quiz. We'll go over what's going to be on the quiz tomorrow. But then this would be good because I'm not going to be